Throw her out. Right now. The words cracked across the hotel lobby so loudly that conversations stopped mid-sentence. Suitcases stopped rolling. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Even the soft piano music drifting through the speakers suddenly felt distant. Ava Sterling stood near the revolving doors of the Sterling Grand Hotel, her dark jeans and plain black t-shirt drawing more attention than the tailored suits surrounding her. A security officer lingered a few feet away, uncertain, while guests turned to see what had caused the commotion. Behind the front desk, General Manager Richard Calloway pointed toward the entrance with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "I said remove her," he repeated. "This hotel is for paying guests." Ava didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply stood there, calm enough to make everyone else uncomfortable. The lobby itself seemed to hold its breath. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Marble floors reflected the afternoon light pouring through 20-foot windows. Everything looked polished, expensive, perfect. Everything except the scene unfolding in the center of it. Richard stepped from behind the desk and folded his arms. "You've already caused enough disruption," he said. "Leave before this becomes a bigger problem." A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Others quietly reached for their phones. Something about the situation felt wrong. Ava's expression never changed. If anything, she looked almost disappointed. The kind of disappointment that comes when reality confirms something you hoped wasn't true. Near the concierge station, a young employee named Emily Carter shifted nervously. She had seen countless guests walk through those doors. Business travelers, celebrities, professional athletes, wealthy investors. Yet something about this woman seemed different. Not because of what she wore, but because of how she carried herself. Ava stood with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. Richard mistook that confidence for defiance. "You think standing there silently changes anything?" he asked. "You don't belong here." The sentence landed like a hammer. Several guests visibly reacted. One older woman frowned. A man waiting to check in lowered his newspaper. Across the lobby, someone quietly started recording. Ava looked around the room, taking in every face, every whisper, every uncomfortable stare. The air no longer felt like hotel air. It felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. Then something unexpected happened. Ava glanced at the massive silver logo mounted behind the front desk. Her eyes lingered there for only a second. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth before disappearing. Richard noticed it and interpreted it as mockery. "What's funny?" he snapped. Ava finally spoke. Her voice was steady, controlled, almost gentle. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just surprised." Richard scoffed. Surprised by what? For the first time, Ava looked directly into his eyes. By how quickly people reveal who they are. The lobby fell silent again. Nobody knew it yet, but the next few minutes were about to change every career standing behind that front desk. And as cameras quietly continued recording from every corner of the room, the woman Richard wanted removed from the building remained exactly where she was, calm as stone, while the foundation beneath his authority began to crack. Ava Sterling held Richard Calloway's stare for several long seconds, and somehow that silence carried more weight than any argument could have. Around them, the lobby remained frozen in a strange state between luxury and chaos. Guests were no longer checking in. Bell staff had stopped moving luggage. Even the front desk employees seemed unsure whether they were witnessing a routine confrontation or the beginning of something much larger. Richard cleared his throat and attempted to reclaim control of the room. "I am giving you one final opportunity to leave voluntarily," he said. "If you remain here, we will consider this trespassing." The words sounded rehearsed, polished, official. Ava tilted her head slightly. "Interesting choice of words," she replied. Richard frowned. "There is nothing interesting about it." Ava glanced toward the front entrance where sunlight poured through the glass, casting long reflections across the marble floor. 11 minutes earlier, she had walked through those same doors unnoticed. No designer handbag, no jewelry worth discussing, no entourage, no assistant, just dark jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a black t-shirt. Exactly as planned. She had visited properties this way for years. People revealed more when they thought nobody important was watching. The strongest leaders learned by listening. The weakest leaders exposed themselves without realizing it. Richard had spent less than 10 minutes with her and had already revealed more than enough. Emily Carter stood behind the concierge desk, her concern growing by the second. She had reviewed the reservation system earlier that morning. She distinctly remembered seeing a special notation attached to a penthouse suite booking. Executive-level authorization. Owner-level access. Those labels were rare. Extremely rare. Yet every time she tried to speak, Richard shut her down with a glance. "Sir," Emily finally said carefully, "maybe we should verify." "Not now." "Emily," Richard interrupted sharply. "The matter is settled." Ava noticed the exchange immediately. So did several guests nearby. An older businessman sitting near the fireplace lowered his tablet and watched more closely. A young couple standing beside the elevators exchanged uncertain looks. The atmosphere felt different now. People were no longer observing because they were curious. They were observing because something felt wrong. Richard sensed it too. That was why his voice kept getting louder. "You are disrupting the experience of our guests," he declared. "This hotel has standards." Ava nodded slowly. "It should." The answer caught him off guard. "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "It means standards matter," Ava said calmly. "The question is whether they apply to everyone." A murmur spread through the lobby. Richard's jaw tightened. He turned toward a security supervisor standing nearby. "Please escort her outside." The supervisor hesitated. Not refused. Not complied. Just hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but everyone noticed. Ava noticed most of all. Confidence began to crack around the edges of Richard's authority. The room could feel it. Emily looked toward her computer screen once more. Her heart started beating faster. There it was again. The same reservation record she remembered. The same name. The same authorization level. Her eyes widened. For the first time, she realized this situation might be far worse than anyone behind that desk understood. And as Ava stood perfectly composed beneath the glow of the chandeliers, the hotel manager continued marching toward a mistake that was becoming impossible to reverse. Emily Carter stared at the reservation record as if it might disappear if she blinked. The owner-level authorization was still there. The name was still there. Everything she remembered seeing that morning was exactly the same. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Richard Calloway was not dealing with an ordinary guest. He was making assumptions, and those assumptions were steering him directly toward disaster. Across the lobby, Ava Sterling remained perfectly composed. She stood near the center of the polished marble floor while dozens of eyes followed every movement. The room felt smaller now, crowded not by people but by tension. Conversations had vanished completely. Guests were openly watching. Several phones remained raised. The security supervisor shifted uneasily before taking a cautious step forward. "Ma'am," he said politely, "perhaps we can resolve this outside." Ava looked at him for a moment. "Why outside?" she asked. The question sounded simple. The effect was not. The supervisor hesitated again. Richard answered instead. "Because you are no longer welcome here." Ava nodded slowly. "Interesting." Richard's patience visibly thinned. "Everything is interesting to you, apparently." "Not everything," Ava replied. "Just leadership." A few guests exchanged looks. Someone quietly chuckled. Richard heard it and immediately became more defensive. "You think this is a joke?" he asked. "No," Ava said. "I think it is a test." The words hung in the air. Richard scoffed loudly. "A test of what?" Ava glanced around the lobby. "Character." The answer irritated him more than any insult could have. He turned toward the front desk staff. "Pull up every reservation under her name," he ordered. "I want verification immediately." Employees began typing. Screens glowed. Names were searched. Records were reviewed. Yet each passing second only deepened the uncertainty. Emily watched the process unfold and knew exactly what they would find if anyone bothered looking carefully enough. But nobody wanted facts. They wanted confirmation of what they had already decided to believe. That was the real problem. Near the elevators, a middle-aged woman carrying a designer suitcase stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said. "Has anyone actually done anything wrong here?" Richard forced a professional smile. "We are handling the situation." "It does not look like it," the woman replied. Her husband nodded beside her. More guests began murmuring in agreement. The balance of the room was shifting. Richard could feel it. That only made him push harder. "Security," he said firmly. "Escort her out." The supervisor remained where he was. Not because he refused, because something felt off. Ava noticed his reluctance. "You seem uncertain," she said calmly. "That usually means your instincts are trying to tell you something." Richard laughed sharply. "Do not listen to her." Ava never looked away from the supervisor. Always listen to your instincts. The silence that followed felt electric. Then Emily finally stepped away from her desk. Her pulse raced as she walked forward. She knew speaking up might cost her job. She also knew remaining silent would cost something worse. Richard saw her approaching and immediately frowned. "Emily," he warned. But this time she did not stop. She looked directly at Ava, then at the gathering crowd, then back at her manager. And for the first time since the confrontation began, someone inside the hotel was preparing to challenge the story Richard had been trying so desperately to control. Emily Carter stopped 3 feet from the front desk, her hands trembling slightly, even though her voice remained steady. Every employee in the lobby looked at her. Every guest watched her. Richard Calloway stared as if he could silence her through sheer force of will. "Emily," he said sharply, "return to your station." She did not move. For the first time since the confrontation began, someone inside the hotel was refusing to follow his script. The silence stretched across the lobby like a wire pulled tight. "I cannot do that," Emily replied. Richard blinked. "Excuse me." Emily took a breath. "I said I cannot do that." The room seemed to lean forward. Guests lowered their phones only to hear better. Others raised them higher. Ava Sterling remained calm, watching without interruption. She did not rescue Emily. She did not guide her. She simply allowed the truth to find its own path. Richard's face hardened. "This is not the time." "Actually," Emily said, "it is exactly the time." A murmur moved through the crowd. Richard glanced around and realized he was losing control of more than the situation. He was losing the room itself. Emily turned toward the security supervisor. "Before anyone asks her to leave, you should know something." Richard stepped forward. "Enough." Emily continued anyway. "I checked the reservation system this morning. I saw her name." The security supervisor frowned. "What are you saying?" Emily swallowed hard. "I am saying she has a valid reservation." Several guests exchanged looks. One man near the elevators nodded slowly, as if a missing puzzle piece had finally appeared. Richard immediately shook his head. "That does not change anything." Emily looked directly at him. "There is more." The lobby became completely silent. Even Richard did not interrupt. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Emily continued carefully. "Her reservation is not standard. It carries executive-level authorization." The words landed heavily. Richard laughed, but the sound lacked confidence. "That proves nothing." "There is also an owner-level designation attached to the account," Emily said. A wave of whispers swept across the room. Richard's smile vanished. The security supervisor looked from Emily to Ava and back again. "Owner level," he repeated. Emily nodded. "Yes." The atmosphere changed instantly. It was subtle but undeniable. People who had been skeptical began reconsidering everything they had witnessed. The businessman near the fireplace stood from his chair. The couple by the elevators stopped, pretending not to watch. Several employees behind the desk suddenly looked nervous. Richard attempted to recover. System errors happen all the time. But even he sounded unconvinced. Ava finally spoke. "Do they?" Richard turned toward her. "You have manipulated everyone in this lobby." Ava's expression never changed. Or maybe everyone is simply paying attention now. The sentence struck harder than any accusation. Emily glanced back toward her computer screen. A new notification had appeared beside the reservation file. Her eyes widened again. She had never seen that designation before. Not once in 3 years working at the hotel. Whatever this situation was, it had become far bigger than anyone imagined. Richard saw her reaction and felt his confidence slip another inch. Around him, the lobby no longer felt like a place where guests checked into rooms. It felt like a stage where the truth was slowly stepping into the spotlight. And for the first time since Ava walked through the doors, Richard looked less like a manager in control and more like a man running out of explanations. The notification on Emily Carter's screen refused to disappear. She stared at it while the noise of the lobby seemed to fade into the background. The designation attached to Ava Sterling's reservation was unlike anything she had encountered before. It carried layers of authorization that ordinary employees never saw. Her pulse quickened. Across the marble floor, Ava remained composed while uncertainty spread through the building like a slow-moving storm. Richard Calloway noticed Emily's expression immediately. "What is it now?" he demanded. Emily looked up, but did not answer right away. The hesitation was enough to make everyone nervous. Guests shifted closer. Employees exchanged glances. The security supervisor folded his arms and waited. Even Richard seemed afraid of what she might say next. Ava watched quietly. She had seen moments like this before. Moments when people reached the crossroads between protecting a lie and acknowledging the truth. The lobby lights reflected softly against the polished stone floor, and for a brief second the scene reminded Ava of another lobby many years earlier. She had been 18 then, exhausted after traveling across state lines with her mother to attend a scholarship interview. They entered a luxury hotel hoping to rest before the event. The clerk behind the desk had looked at them, then looked at the guests around them, and immediately assumed they did not belong. Questions turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into humiliation. No one shouted. No one needed to. The message had been clear. You are not who we expected. You do not belong in this space. Ava remembered standing there while strangers watched. She remembered promising herself that if she ever gained enough influence, she would build places where dignity was not determined by appearances. The memory vanished as quickly as it arrived. She returned to the present. The same marble floors. The same assumptions. Different faces. Same story. Emily finally spoke. There is another authorization attached to the account. Richard rolled his eyes. Then explain it. Emily swallowed hard. I cannot access all of it. The answer startled everyone. Why not? Asked the security supervisor. Because my clearance is too low. A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Richard laughed nervously. You are making this sound dramatic. I am not trying to, Emily replied. I am telling you exactly what I see. The businessman near the fireplace stepped closer. Then maybe someone with higher clearance should review it. Several guests nodded in agreement. Richard's confidence continued to erode. Every attempt to dismiss Ava seemed to create more questions. Every explanation created more doubt. Ava stood calmly beneath the chandeliers as though she already knew how the story would end. Richard pointed toward the entrance once more. None of this changes the fact that she needs to leave. Ava looked directly at him. You are still focused on the wrong problem. Richard frowned. And what is the right problem? Ava's voice remained steady. The reason everyone keeps finding evidence that contradicts you. The lobby fell silent again. The statement landed heavily because nobody could argue with it. For the first time, Richard had no immediate response. And, as the crowd watched him struggle for words, the foundation beneath his authority cracked a little wider, while the truth continued moving steadily toward the surface. Ava Sterling watched Richard Calloway search desperately for certainty and find none. The lobby had changed. A few minutes earlier, people had looked at her with curiosity. Now they looked at Richard with suspicion. The difference was subtle but powerful. Truth rarely arrived all at once. It arrived one crack at a time until the entire wall gave way. Richard straightened his tie and forced a smile that convinced nobody. This has gone far enough, he said. We are done discussing this. Ava tilted her head slightly. You are free to stop discussing it, she replied. The facts are not. Several guests nodded. The businessman near the fireplace folded his arms. The couple near the elevators remained rooted in place. Even employees who had avoided eye contact earlier now watched openly. The lobby no longer felt like Richard's domain. It felt like neutral ground, a place where authority had to be earned rather than assumed. Emily Carter glanced again at the reservation file. Then another notification appeared. Her eyes widened. This one was different. It was not attached to the reservation itself. It came from a corporate channel that ordinary employees rarely saw. Before she could process it, Ava calmly reached into her pocket and removed her phone. The motion was simple, almost ordinary, yet something about it immediately captured everyone's attention. Richard noticed. Who are you calling? He asked. Ava looked at the screen for a moment before answering. Someone who pays attention to details. She tapped once. The call connected almost instantly. Good afternoon, Ms. Sterling, a professional voice answered. Several people nearby heard the greeting and exchanged puzzled looks. Ava spoke calmly. Monica, activate Protocol 7. The lobby went silent. Richard frowned. Protocol what? Ava ignored him. Begin documentation, she continued. Log all employee interactions from the last 15 minutes. Preserve security footage. Preserve access records. Preserve reservation history. Monica's voice remained calm. Already in progress. Do you want executive review? Yes, Ava said. Immediately. Understood. The call ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The air itself seemed heavier. Richard laughed, but the sound came out strained. You expect people to believe that means something? Ava slipped the phone back into her pocket. It already does. Emily looked at her monitor. New activity appeared across the system. Files were being accessed. Permissions were changing. Corporate review flags began appearing beside records connected to the hotel. Her stomach dropped. Whatever Protocol 7 was, it was real. Very real. The security supervisor noticed her reaction. Emily, he said quietly, what are you seeing? She hesitated before answering. Corporate systems are opening investigations. Richard's face paled slightly. That is impossible. Emily shook her head. No. It is happening right now. Guests began whispering again. Phones rose higher. The businessman near the fireplace smiled faintly. Well, he said, that does not sound like something an ordinary guest can do. Richard looked at Ava. For the first time since this began, genuine uncertainty entered his eyes. Ava remained calm beneath the chandeliers, standing exactly where she had stood from the beginning. You keep asking the wrong questions, she said quietly. You keep asking why I am here. Soon you are going to start asking who gave me the authority to stay. The moment Ava Sterling finished speaking, the atmosphere inside the lobby shifted again. It was no longer uncertainty. It was anticipation. Everyone could feel it. The guests, the employees, even Richard Calloway. Something important was approaching, and for the first time since this began, he seemed unable to stop it. His eyes moved between Ava, Emily, and the front desk monitors as if the answer might appear somewhere he had not looked yet. Enough of these games, he said, though the confidence in his voice had faded. Who exactly do you think you are? Ava studied him quietly. The question lingered in the air. Around them, phones remained raised. The businessman near the fireplace stopped pretending to read his messages. The couple near the elevators stood completely still. Employees behind the desk exchanged nervous glances. Nobody wanted to miss what came next. Emily's computer chimed softly. Another notification appeared. This one was impossible to ignore. Her eyes widened immediately. She looked at the screen, then at Ava, then back at the screen. Oh my God, she whispered. Richard heard her. What now? He demanded. Emily hesitated. The system updated. Then read it. Richard snapped. Emily swallowed hard. The words displayed on her monitor seemed unreal. Executive ownership verification confirmed, she read quietly. The lobby fell silent. Richard stared at her. What? Emily looked up slowly. Executive ownership verification confirmed. The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Several guests gasped. One employee behind the desk took a step backward. The security supervisor blinked twice as if he had misheard. Richard laughed nervously. That does not mean anything. But nobody believed him anymore. Not even he seemed to believe himself. Emily continued reading. Direct ownership authority recognized across all Sterling hospitality properties. The whispers returned immediately, louder this time. Ava remained perfectly calm. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply watched the truth arrive exactly when it was supposed to. Richard's face lost color. There has to be some mistake. Ava finally looked directly at him. That explanation is becoming less convincing every minute. Richard opened his mouth, but found nothing to say. The room was slipping away from him completely. Every assumption he had made was collapsing under the weight of facts. The businessman near the fireplace spoke first. Are you telling me she owns this hotel? Emily looked at the screen one final time before answering. No, the room froze. Richard almost smiled. Then Emily finished her sentence. The system says she owns every hotel in this company. Complete silence followed. Even the air felt still. Richard stared at Ava as understanding finally began forcing its way through denial. The security supervisor lowered his hands. Employees behind the desk looked stunned. Several guests exchanged expressions of disbelief. Ava took one slow step forward. The marble floor reflected the chandelier light beneath her feet. You spent the last 20 minutes deciding I did not belong here, she said calmly. Nobody interrupted. Nobody could. You questioned my presence. You questioned my credibility. You questioned my right to stand in this lobby. Richard looked away. Ava's voice remained steady. The problem was never who I was. She paused. Every eye in the room remained fixed on her. The problem was who you assumed I could not be. For several seconds, nobody moved. The revelation settled over the lobby like a wave rolling through still water. Richard Calloway stood frozen behind the front desk, staring at Ava Sterling as though the truth itself had become impossible to process. Every assumption he had made was now visible to everyone around him. Every guest had witnessed it. Every employee had witnessed it. The phones recording from across the lobby remained raised, capturing the silence that followed the collapse of certainty. Ava did not look triumphant. She looked disappointed. That was somehow worse. The businessman near the fireplace shook his head slowly. She was telling the truth the entire time, he said. No one disagreed. Emily Carter glanced back at her monitor as another notification appeared. This one arrived with a sharp tone that echoed through the desk area. Her eyes widened. Then another tone sounded from a second workstation. Then a third. Employees began looking at their screens. Expressions shifted from confusion to alarm. "Richard," one desk agent whispered, "you need to see this." Richard walked over mechanically. The color drained from his face as he read the message. Corporate review had officially opened. Access logs were being audited. Security footage had been preserved. Employee actions were under immediate examination. Every decision made during the incident was now documented. The security supervisor checked his own device and frowned. The same notification had reached his account. Around the lobby, guests watched the unfolding consequences in complete silence. Ava folded her hands calmly in front of her. "Leadership is not revealed when things are easy," she said. "Leadership is revealed when someone believes they have power over another person." Richard looked up from the screen. For the first time, he seemed to understand the damage. "Miss Sterling, I think there has been a misunderstanding." Several guests exchanged looks. The statement sounded weak even before it finished leaving his mouth. Ava met his gaze. "You call me a disruption." Richard said nothing. "You questioned whether I belonged here." Still nothing. "You attempted to remove me from a hotel you believed I had no right to enter." The silence grew heavier with each sentence. Emily lowered her eyes. Other employees looked away. Ava's voice remained calm. "The problem is not that you failed to recognize me." She paused. "The problem is how you treated someone you thought did not matter." Nobody in the lobby could argue with that. A notification suddenly appeared on the large administrative display behind the front desk. Several employees gasped. Temporary suspension notices had begun appearing across management accounts pending executive review. Access permissions were being restricted in real time. The authority Richard had relied upon all afternoon was disappearing before his eyes. Guests watched as the balance of power shifted completely. The lobby that had once felt like a stage for humiliation had become a stage for accountability. Ava remained exactly where she had stood from the beginning, calm as stone beneath the chandeliers, while the system she had built quietly began correcting the failure that had unfolded in front of everyone. The notifications continued, arriving one after another. Behind the front desk, screens displayed updated permissions, review notices, and executive directives. Nobody had to explain what was happening anymore. The evidence was visible to everyone. Richard Calloway stood motionless, staring at the display that had once represented his authority. Now it reflected something entirely different. Accountability. Around him, employees remained silent. Guests watched quietly. The energy that had filled the lobby earlier had transformed into something calmer and far more powerful. Ava. Sterling looked across the room she had spent years helping build. The marble floors still gleamed beneath the chandeliers. The flowers still decorated the reception area. The hotel itself had not changed. What changed was the illusion that appearances could determine a person's value. Emily Carter's workstation chimed again. She read the latest message and looked up. "Executive review has concluded preliminary findings," she said softly. Several employees held their breath. Richard closed his eyes briefly. Deep down, he already knew. The outcome had been decided long before the notifications arrived. It had been decided the moment assumptions replaced professionalism. Ava remained calm. She had not raised her voice once. She had not demanded respect. She had simply allowed people to reveal themselves. That was what made the moment unforgettable. A corporate call appeared on the main administrative line. Emily answered, listened carefully, then nodded. When she ended the call, the lobby seemed to grow even quieter. "Corporate leadership has issued immediate personnel actions," she announced. No cheers followed. No celebration. Only silence. The kind of silence that appears when consequences finally arrive. Several management accounts were permanently deactivated. Administrative privileges disappeared. Temporary reviews became permanent decisions. The system moved forward with the same efficiency it always had. The difference was that now everyone could see it happening. Richard lowered his head. The authority he had relied on was gone. Not because of one mistake, because of a pattern revealed in front of witnesses. Ava looked toward Emily. "Thank you for speaking up." Emily blinked, surprised. "I was afraid to." Ava nodded. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is telling the truth while fear is standing beside you. Emily smiled faintly. For the first time all afternoon, she looked relieved. Nearby guests began quietly applauding. The sound started with one person, then another, then several more. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It felt genuine. The businessman near the fireplace smiled and shook his head. "I think every manager in America should. Watch what happened here today," he said. A few guests laughed softly. Ava looked around the lobby one final time. The same place where she had been judged minutes earlier now felt completely different. Not because she owned it, because the truth was finally visible. She took a slow breath and spoke the words that would stay with everyone who heard them. Respect should never depend on clothing, assumptions, or appearances. The real test of character is how you treat people before you know who they are. Nobody spoke after that. They did not need to. The lesson had already landed. Ava turned toward the elevators and walked across the marble floor without hurry, without anger, and without looking back. The lobby remained silent as she disappeared from view, and long after she was gone, the people who witnessed that afternoon remembered one thing above all else. She never raised her voice. She raised the standard.